to get some sense of what Vladimir Putin's next steps might be, not to mention all we can glean about what might affect his decision-making. Joining us for that, David Remnick. He is, in addition to being editor of The New Yorker, also a noted Russia observer, reporter, and historian, as well as author of the indispensable book Lenin's Tomb, The Last Days of the Soviet Empire. So, David, you heard President Biden talk about this in his speech today, Putin's desire to remake the Soviet Union. Do you think that is actually, it may be an ideological aim, do you think it's an actual realistic thing he believes he could achieve?
I think in the sense that Biden seemed to be talking about the recreation of this old Soviet Union and all 15 what were republics and are now independent nations is not only impossible, but crazily expensive. Why did empire collapse all over the world historically? Not only the Soviet Union, but Austria-Hungary and all the rest. Empire is expensive. Russia is not a wealthy country in the main. Its entire economy is the size of the economy of Texas. And most of those resources come right out of energy extraction. It's a very fragile economy for a country that large. Today, we saw the ruble crater. We saw the Russian stock market crater. We also saw something very curious, and I have to say, maybe even unexpected. Despite a continuing crackdown on dissent in Russia that's been going on for years, we saw protests of modest scale in dozens of Russian cities, and according to one report, over 1,500 arrests, brutal arrests, and so on. So to see politics on the street is, I think, startling to Vladimir Putin, because what he dreads the most, what he fears the most, is some kind of uprising against him. And so we're coming to a reckoning here where internal Russian politics are concerned too.
So what is the significance of Ukraine to Putin? I mean, when he decided to take territory by force, why start with Ukraine?
Well, a logical person, whether just on sheer strategy, to say nothing of moral logic, would tell you that you're probably not going to seduce a country back into the fold by dropping missiles on it, by bombing it. History is full of examples of this kind of quote unquote seduction through military means, and it fails. It's quite likely that if Vladimir Putin wants to, his armed forces can take Kiev, can arrest Zelensky and install a puppet government. But then what? How long does that last? How expensive is that? What do Russians think about this as the information begins to come into the country? So that's why I was so surprised and heartened to see not only the resilience of the Ukrainian people, which is so incredibly moving, and the dignity of President Zelensky's speech compared to the madness and erratic behavior of Vladimir Putin. It was also really an interesting sign to see what was happening on the streets of so many Russian cities today. I'm not saying that there's a mass uprising across Russia, not by any means. But I also remember in 1968 when the Soviet Union invaded Czechoslovakia, 8 people went to Red Square and unfurled banners against that invasion for less than a minute, and they were beaten by the KGB and arrested and sent to prison and all the rest. But that, in many ways, was the beginning of a dissident movement, a serious dissident movement in the Soviet Union that had incredible repercussions.
If Putin is able to take over Ukraine, and as you said, what then? I mean, does he hold the country? Does the cost of holding the country? There had been talk of the possibility of a future insurgency if there's a Russian occupying force. Do you think that's realistic? Obviously, we've seen a lot of people just trying to flee the country when they can. Now all males are being told they have to stay in Ukraine. Do you see?
Well,
how do you see it happen? What does it look like under occupation?
For me, the lowest form of journalism is prediction. I'm not a gambling man, but it is, the potential is there for something very bloody, very prolonged, something extremely expensive in blood and treasure. We've seen it. We've seen it ourselves as Americans. In other instances, we've seen it in the Middle East. We've seen it in South Asia. The question here that has to be at the center is, what does Vladimir Putin think he's doing? Toward what end? How in any way does this help bring prosperity or even security to Russia? What threat is he responding to? Was Ukraine threatening Russia? Was NATO threatening Russia? No, I think that Putin, in large measure, not to make this into a novel, but in large measure, is responding to his own self-drama as a man of great power and wanting to expand Russian power, revive Russian power after his failure to bring prosperity to Russia after